Okay, grade 11, here we are with lesson number 5 of our last unit, Introduction to Statistics. Take a minute and read that cartoon, that little quote there. I think it's pretty funny, and it's a really good way to think about statistics because oftentimes we tend to just believe numbers and trust in the truth they tell us, especially in stuff we tend to think of numbers being very objective, but statistics can really help us understand that it can often be manipulated, and the way we see the numbers depends on how we look at them and what we do. So it's just help us get that clarity with our numbers. So why do you have to do stats in a bio course? Well, the big thing here is for the IA and for any sort of research. Well, I know when I did my graduate research on environmental education, I had to do a lot of stats. I took stats in my second year of my undergrad in biology. And it's something you need to have to be able to understand the numbers and do a good analysis of your data and your experiment findings. It's something that everyone who's a scientist and who works in science, in the field of science, does any sort of research at all, whether it's in science, social studies, mathematics, any of those things, they are expected to be able to do statistics. So the nice thing is, because you're not, or you might be, but as of right now, you're not trained to be statisticians, you don't need to memorize how to do the various tests we're going to learn. What you need to be able to do is identify which test to use and then use your notes or use your information to help you do so. I know I still use lookup for some of the tests I don't do very often. I have lookup the steps, but because I remember and have enough understanding of how stats works, I know how to choose the right test, and once I find the instructions, I know how to follow them. So we're going to work on that. According in the IB guide, this is what I found for research statistics. You need to be able to talk about the following things: the mean, median, mode, and range, different kinds of graphs, specifically bar charts, scatter graphs, line graphs, histograms, and error bars on those graphs, probability and p-value, the t-test, chi-square. We're also doing Pearson's correlation in this unit because it's really handy for some of your research, depending on what you're choosing to do, and the ANOVA as well, which are not required tests for the IB, but can be very helpful for certain kinds of IAs. Standard deviation, and then difference between causation and correlation. So we're going to go through all of these things and some more in this unit to help you both be prepared to do the paper 2, paper 3 questions that talk about data analysis, do your IA, and just be more educated about what numbers mean and what the data means from an experiment and how you can interpret that data. Okay, so why does statistics matter? Why do we care about stats? Well, when Carl Pearson, he said this really famous and kind of beautiful quote about stats, that statistics is the grammar of science. Think about that for a minute. What do you think that means? If you think about grammar for a language, that's the rules we follow to join ideas together, to make sentences, to communicate information clearly. That's what grammar is, a set of rules that you use to communicate with, right, in a language. So statistics is the rules we use to communicate in science, the way we communicate what our numbers mean, what our findings mean, as through statistics. There we go. So it's how we understand our data. It's how we determine if two variables are related, or even more than two variables, depending what kind of experiment you're looking at. It's also how we determine how reliable our data is. So is our data really measuring what we think it's measuring? Is it measuring that consistently? That kind of thing. We talked about reliability and validity already, and we can understand that even better with statistics. And it's also we can understand the reliability of other scientists. Is their work reliable and valid? When you're reading a paper, you're looking for something to compare your findings with. Do you want to compare your findings with someone whose work is not reliable? Definitely, especially if it's very different from yours, that's a great place to look and say, okay, I found this particular result from all my experiments on pollution and duckweed populations. I found someone else's experiment and they found the exact opposite of me. That's weird. So you need to look into your reliability and validity, and then you look into theirs as well. Okay, so we're going to start with descriptive statistics. So this is a specific branch of stats. It's often thought of kind of as a little bit simpler version, but based on the title, what do you think descriptive stats is? What is it? Well, these are specific statistical tools that we use to describe a data set. Often we call a data set a sample in statistics. That's the kind of the term we use for a data set. And with practice and really thorough understanding of these different terms and different tools you can use in descriptive statistics, you can figure out, do you have sufficient data for further analysis or not? So it's a really great thing to do because they tend to be shorter tests to conduct, and then you can figure out, do I have enough data? Is my data reliable and valid? And if it's not, collect more data. Or maybe change your procedure and then collect more data. And if it is, you can just stop. So great kind of step to check your data collection along the way. So we're going to spend the next few classes working with different statistical tools. We'll start with descriptive ones today, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so here are the 4 kind of most basic ones. You've probably heard of, if not all of these, at least most of these before. We're going to go through into what they mean in terms of this particular data set, and this example of little people and their height, and when you would use each one. So the mean, median, and mode are part of descriptive statistics, there we go, because they help describe the data set. Right? So the mean is sometimes called the average in non-statistical vernacular, and that of course means what is the most kind of, if you take all the different data points, add them up, divide by the number of data points, that's the average, or the mean. The median, if we take all the values and list them in order from smallest to largest, that's the middle value. If you have an even number and you don't have a single middle value, then what you do is you take the 2 values that are central and take the average or the mean of those 2 values to get the median. And the mode is the most common data point. So in this one, the mode is 155 centimeters, so there's 2 people with that particular height, and that makes it the mode. And the range is a spread of the data. So we have from 155 centimeters to 168 centimeters in this particular data set. That's the range. So if you're doing statistics, it's not enough to just do one of these early descriptive statistic tests. You have to do all of them because they all tell you different things. So think about for a second, what are the different things they can tell you? And maybe think of a situation in which 1 or 2 might be misleading as towards like the central tendency of the data. Well, a lot of people go to mean immediately as their first choice, and that's a good one because it makes sure that all the data points have kind of equal weight into what the central tendency of the data is. But the mean is very, very susceptible to outliers. If I had these 5 heights here and I had one more individual who was like 180 centimeters tall, that would really affect the mean, even though that's not really representative of the sample, right? So we need to make sure that if you have the mean but you have some outliers, that might not be the best choice. So go to compare the mean with is the median. When the median and the mean are really close to each other, like in this example, we have a mean of 160 and a median of 158 that are very close. That's a good sign. That means your data set doesn't have any crazy outliers, and that your central value is similar to what's calculated by the mean. So if these 2 are not similar, that could mean that you have some outliers in your data. And we need to collect more data until the point where the mean becomes similar enough to the median that it's no longer this big difference. The mode is not often useful for a lot of quantitative statistics, a lot of quantitative values or samples. For example, if you were doing the weight of somebody as you were going to be analyzing, the chance of having multiple people with the exact same weight down to maybe 2 decimal points or 1 decimal point is pretty slim. So the mode can be less useful for that kind of data, but if you're doing something like a survey that's more qualitative, looking at an emotion survey or looking at maybe a type of transportation someone will use, that is can be very useful. So the type of data you put into a histogram, that is really useful to have the mode for that. But again, if the mode is very different from the mean or the median, if any of these are really, really far apart from each other, that's a sign that something's up with your sample. There's something weird with your data set. You need to look into it. Do you have some outliers? Do you have enough data collected? That kind of stuff. So always start with these four. And the range, of course, will tell you it's a really good measure of any outliers. If the range is really big and you have really low or really high values that are not even close to your mean and median, then that means there's something off. Okay, so as you're doing your mock IA here, you should definitely be stopping after you've collected 15, 20 samples of data, and then do this calculation. Do the mean, median, mode. It's pretty easy to do on Excel or Google Sheets, the range, and see if those are close to each other. If they are, then you need to have at least 30 data points for most statistical tests. But you're on the right track. If you do, and they're really far apart, there's something else going on. Maybe you need to add a constant. Maybe you need to have something else going on here to check what's happening with your data. It's a great way to check yourself. Okay, so now we're going to practice. So you're going to collect a sample data set, and you can choose to do this by yourself in your own little data set, or you can choose to collaborate with one or many classmates. You can do a whole class set, it's up to you. But what you're going to do is we're going to do hand length. So as long as someone you know at home, a friend, a relative, whatever, a neighbor, anybody, if they have a ruler, a measure tape, something, they can measure how long their hand is. So to keep this consistent, we're going to be measuring from the base of the hand right here, the wrist starts, to the tip of the middle finger. Even if another finger is longer, we're going to use the middle finger so it's a straight line. Okay? And that's the measure you're going to make. So for each person in your sample, you're going to collect how long their hand is from the base of their hand, where the wrist begins, to the length of their middle finger. So if I measure mine right now, here's a first data point for everybody out there. 18.2 centimeters. There you go. No, 18.4 centimeters. So you're going to put that down, what their hand length is, and you're also going to get their age. And we're not going to use their age for this initial analysis. We'll use this data set multiple times to practice data set throughout this unit. So at least 30 data points. If you guys collaborate, you can have more than 30. That's great. It'll mean you have more accuracy in your data. So for your first data point, everybody, my hand, I said 18.4 centimeters. Oh, let's double check, make sure I don't tell you the wrong thing. Yeah, 18.4 centimeters, and I am 34 years old. There you go, that's your first data point. So again, if you want to do it in a Google sheet and share that collaboratively, go for it. If you want to do it by yourself, that's fine, but you need to have at least 30 data points. Once you have those 30 data points, you are then going to do the descriptive statistics of that data set. So mean, median, mode, and range. And then think about how you would graph it. We'll talk more about that next lesson on Thursday. It's all about graphing. Okay? With age, without age, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that is the practice of hand length. Your mock IA. There's no new steps for today. For this week, really, it's just more focusing on your individually each at your own kind of point. Once you have approved your final topic with me, and you'll be working on your procedure. So this week, I'm not going to post any next steps, and we'll start doing that more next week because you'll need time to kind of finesse and decide your topic. If you don't have a topic by the end of the week, that is a major red flag for me, and I'll be very concerned you're not going to get this done. So you need to be on top of that. Okay? So make sure you're emailing me once you have your top through which one you want to do, your number one choice. We'll discuss it that way. Make sure it's doable in quarantine. Make sure you have good sources from lesson number 3 that we did with Miss Lemaster, and you can design an investigation around that idea. And remember, this is a big deal. It's your summative for this whole unit, and it's a really good measure for me of your skills. Something to think about as we go through all of these lessons in this section of the unit, we're doing different statistical tests, is you have to keep in mind the tests you can possibly do. So I have put this flowchart not just in the lesson, but it's also in the unit resources folder on Schoology. So you need to make sure you're designing your procedure that you can have enough data to do some sort of statistical test. So you could do chi-squared, you could do a t-test, ANOVA, regression, you could do a Pearson's. We're going to go through all of these in this unit, but you need to make sure you think about that as you're designing your procedure for your exam once your topic is chosen. Okay, many tests have a minimum data requirement. Usually it's about 30 different samples, so make sure you have everything you need before you finish. I've had some students do a test where they set up a very specific experiment, and then after they realized, oh my gosh, I only got 20 participants and I need to have 30 to be able to do a t-test. And then everything went kind of haywire. And if they had just taken a little bit more time in their planning stages and made sure they had the data they needed to do their statistical test, it would not have been a problem. Okay? You can't figure out what test to use, but you need to pick a different experiment, a different IA topic. Okay, so your homework, upload the notes from today, keep that split page format. Make sure you include your hand length and agent. If you're doing it in a Google Doc, then just insert the link to that Google Doc, that's fine for me. And make sure you're still working on your IA, your mock IA. And keep the stats in mind for the next 4 lessons or so we're doing stats. Okay guys, I hope this is helpful for you and that you're staying home safe and not going too crazy. Take care, and I will see you at our class Zoom on Wednesday.